Captain tried to leave me in Gibraltar without a visa, forcing me to contact the owner for a safe disembarkation in Spain. I've been working in yachting for a while, but what happened recently was by far one of the most stressful and outright frightening experiences I've ever endured. As a stewardess/deckhand on a 20 meters yacht, I'd taken a job that was supposed to run until mid-October. Yet, by the end of September, I'd reached my limit. The atmosphere on board had become so toxic and unbearable that I decided I had to resign. Out of sheer professionalism, I honored my contract and stayed on for the required 7-day notice period. At that time, we were moored in Corsica. The plan was to head from there all the way to the Canary Islands. But the very moment I gave my notice, the captain's demeanor shifted drastically. Suddenly, he was cold, distant, almost hostile. Any time I tried to speak to him about when and where I'd be disembarking, he'd dodge my questions, refusing to give me a clear answer. I tried approaching him several times. I just wanted clarity, some concrete information so I could plan my next steps. Each time, he shut me down, brushing me off with barely disguised annoyance. As we got closer to southern Spain, he finally announced I'd be leaving the yacht in Gibraltar. My heart sank. As a Colombian passport holder, I can't enter Gibraltar without a UK visa, something I don't have. I immediately explained this to him, even pulled up the official government information on my phone, but he stubbornly refused to look at it. He kept insisting I must be mistaken, and that of course I could get off in Gibraltar. I tried to reason with him, calmly, but he wouldn't listen. At that point, a cold sense of anxiety settled over me. The consequences of not being allowed ashore, or worse, being detained, because the captain wouldn't check the rules, were terrifying. I tried to contact the yacht's management agency, but nobody answered. It was Sunday, and I was at sea, isolated. The Wi-Fi on board barely worked. I started to panic, feeling completely helpless and desperate. With nowhere else to turn, I contacted the yacht's owner directly, something I would never have done lightly. I laid everything out for him, sent over the government information, and explained the risk I was facing. Thankfully, he understood immediately and instructed the captain to let me disembark in southern Spain instead of Gibraltar. But if I thought that would bring some peace, I was wrong. When I went to the flybridge for my next watch, the captain followed me in a rage. He screamed at me for contacting the owner, claiming it was unacceptable, and outright denied that I'd even tried to communicate with him beforehand. Over and over, he insisted Gibraltar was Schengen territory. It definitely isn't, and when I tried to stand my ground, he twice attempted to snatch my phone from my hands. At one terrifying moment, he made a gesture as if he was going to hit me. I was utterly petrified. On board there were only 3 of us, him, his partner, the chef, and me. I locked myself in my tiny cabin, hid my passport, and spent the next 20 hours in a state of near constant fear, hardly sleeping, pulse racing, waiting for landfall. Only when we finally reached Fuengirola, Spain, did I finally feel safe. The relief was overwhelming. That night, the stress caught up to me in a panic attack. I'd never felt so vulnerable, so powerless, or so completely unsafe at work. Life at sea can be intense, yes, and some captains are certainly demanding, but no job is worth feeling threatened or trapped, especially where there's no way to just walk away. If you're out there and ever find yourself in a situation that feels wrong, please, trust your instincts. I'm sharing this because nobody should ever have to feel that isolated and afraid, no matter what their line of work is. Update 1. First of all, I just want to say how grateful I am for all the support, kindness, and understanding I've received. Let me share exactly what went down. I was working on board a 20-meter motor yacht with a contract that ran until the 15th of October. Things started to fall apart fast. By the 30th of September, I decided I just couldn't take it anymore. There was barely any food on board, the whole work environment was toxic, and the captain and chef, who were also partners, would constantly abandon me on the boat while they went ashore to hang out. While they enjoyed themselves on land, I was left behind, still working. My contract said I needed to give 7 days notice before quitting. Sometimes, yacht crews get shipped out right away, flight booked and you're sent home the next day. But not this time. The captain decided I should stay for those entire 7 days because he didn't want to handle the navigation alone with his partner. At that moment, we were stationed in Corsica, and their plan was to sail to the Canary Islands. 7 days wasn't nearly enough to make it there, so I was meant to disembark either in the Balearic Islands or somewhere in southern Spain. I made it clear to the captain that I couldn't disembark in Gibraltar because I hold a Colombian passport and don't have the necessary visa. But from the moment I mentioned it, he became fixated on insisting I leave in Gibraltar. Every time I tried to talk sense into him and showed him the official documentation proving I'd need a visa, he shut me down, ignored me, or acted as though I was being unreasonable, or worse, stupid. I knew that being forced to disembark in Gibraltar wouldn't just be bad for me, it would have serious consequences for him and the yacht as well. The situation was even more stressful because there was barely any Wi-Fi, we were way out from shore. The management agency didn't respond to me because it was a Sunday, so I had no one else to reach out to except the yacht owner. I managed to get a brief conversation with the owner, sent him screenshots and proof from the official immigration website, and thankfully, he understood. He immediately called the captain and told him that I should disembark the very next day somewhere in the south of Spain. Just a few hours later, during my watch on the flybridge, the captain lost it. He started shouting at me, tried to snatch my phone out of my hands, twice, and even made a move like he was about to punch me in the face. I'd never felt such a rush of anxiety and fear. We were still far from land, Wi-Fi was spotty, and the captain was getting aggressive, with his partner taking his side. I rushed to my cabin and hid my passport and valuables. From then on, I felt completely unsafe, knowing we still had more than 15 hours of navigation left. Luckily, I had started recording conversations with the captain days before the incident. I knew he would try to deny everything. I got his shouting recorded on the flybridge, along with him telling me that I probably wouldn't get the tip from the previous charter, since giving it to me was up to him, and a handful of other incriminating things he said. The next day, I finally disembarked in Fuengirola, near Malaga. I waited to get my pay before making an official report, to the owner, the management agency, and the flag state, the Cayman Islands in this case, just as I'd been advised. Now, I've been paid and the official report has been filed. Update 2. I decided to include in my report screenshots of the emails I exchanged with the consulate and maritime authorities of Gibraltar. The captain, for some inexplicable reason, was convinced Gibraltar is Spanish territory, but that's simply not true. It's a UK territory. They are negotiating some agreement to join the Schengen area, but, as of today, Colombians like me still need a visa, and it is a long process that takes around 2 months. I also added screenshots of conversations I'd had with my boyfriend, my mom, and a few colleagues who have been in the industry long enough to know the real rules and procedures. The conversations were brief because of the terrible Wi-Fi connection we had, but you can clearly see my terror in those messages. I was absolutely terrified of getting into trouble with immigration authorities and the police, terrified of ruining my travel history, which means a lot to me, since I travel often for work and personal reasons, and, worst of all, terrified of the possibility of being beaten up by the captain and his girlfriend. Just as I expected, the owner was the very first person to respond after I submitted my report. He's actually a very nice person. Apparently, he received my report and immediately called the captain. Of course, the captain claimed I was making everything up, that none of it had happened, and that I just wanted to get money from lies. The owner listened to my side and I described in detail everything that happened on board. I also let him know that I had recorded some of our conversations. I hadn't included this fact in my official report because I knew the captain would just deny it all. The owner asked me to forward those recordings to him, and I did. He listened to them and told me he'd speak with me again next week. The management agency and the flag state still haven't answered. Honestly, I don't even care anymore about what they have to say. All I want is to make sure no one else goes through such a nightmare. I have never felt so vulnerable, scared, and anxious in my life. Some people suggested I try to contact the girl who worked before me, a young South African who also quit in less than 20 days. I seriously suspect something happened to her too, but all I know is that she's young, South African, and I only know her first name. Finding her won't be easy. I don't know what the owner will say to me next. I really hope the captain gets fired. What he did was just plain evil, and it's even worse because he abuses his authority, especially over young women who are far from home and just trying to earn a living. To make matters worse, his partner supports him completely. Update 3. The owner called me sooner than I expected, early Monday morning, calm voice, very direct. He said he'd listened to every second of the recordings. Then he asked me, point blank, if I would allow him to use them with his lawyers and the flag state. I said yes. He apologized for what had happened on his boat and told me he was diverting the yacht to Malaga. A relief captain had already been booked on a morning flight from Palma. That same afternoon, the chef messaged me from a different number, accusing me of ruining their careers and threatening that I'd never work again. I forwarded the screenshots to the owner and to the lawyer he put me in touch with. The lawyer told me to file a formal denuncia in Spain for threats and attempted aggression. I went to the Guardia Civil in Fuengirola with a Marina translator, gave them my statement, and handed over the audios. They opened a case file and told me they'd contact me if they needed anything else. The yacht reached Malaga the next day. This part I only know because the owner kept me looped in, and because a deckhand I know in the area texted me saying the boat had turned up without AIS, slid into the marina, and suddenly there were unfamiliar faces on the dock. The owner had flown in with a relief captain and a Spanish maritime lawyer. Marina security stood by, and then the Guardia Civil showed up as well. I wasn't there, but apparently, it was short and brutal. The owner boarded with a relief captain, did a walkthrough, and told the captain and his partner they were terminated for cause. They tried to argue, refused to hand over the keys and the logbook, and the relief captain just stood there, absolutely stone-faced, while the owner told them they had 20 minutes to pack. They left. The chef was crying and shouting on the key, and the captain kept repeating that nobody would believe some stewardess with a phone. The lawyer took possession of the logbooks and the onboard phone. The Guardia Civil asked to see the captain's certificates and his seaman's medical. They took photos and noted the names. Nobody was arrested, but it was very clear who was leaving and who was staying. Before the end of the day, I received a transfer from the owner, my charter tip, plus the days owed, plus a line that simply said expenses. He asked me to come by the lawyer's office in Marbella to sign a statement for his insurer and hand over copies of anything that could help, recordings, screenshots, the email from Gibraltar Immigration. I went the next morning. The lawyer read my statement back to me in Spanish and English, had me initial every page, and explained they were also filing with the Cayman Registry. He gave me a reference number and told me the flag inspector would likely request crew lists, watch schedules, and bridge logs from that week. That afternoon, I received a message from a South African number. It was the girl who'd worked before me, a deckhand we both know had sent her my email. She told me she'd also quit in under 3 weeks because of the captain, screaming, intimidation, and one night where he blocked the cabin corridor while she tried to get past. She'd paid for her own flight home after he forgot to book it and had a portion of her salary withheld with some flimsy excuse about breakages. She still had photos of bruises on her arm from when he grabbed her wrist. She agreed to send her statement directly to the owner and the flag state. I passed her the lawyer's contact. The management agency finally answered too, very polite, very careful. They asked for the raw audio and the dates and said they had taken immediate steps to remove the captain from their roster pending investigation. They also admitted there had been a prior dispute logged against him months ago but that it had been resolved on board. I don't know what that means, but it fits. Cayman wrote to me the next day with a formal acknowledgement and a case number. They asked for copies of my contract, my payslips, my medical, and confirmation of the exact positions on board during the passages I mentioned. I sent everything. They said a surveyor might contact me for a phone interview. The owner told me he had already forwarded them the logbooks and the recordings, and that he'd also reported the threat messages to the Guardia Civil along with my denuncia. Then something I didn't expect, the owner offered to pay for therapy sessions and told me he was putting in place a direct line for crew to reach him that the captain does not control. A physical notebook, locked and numbered, is going on board for crew complaints, and only the management and the owner will hold the code to the new satellite phone. He also said he's changing the boat email so it no longer funnels through the captain. The captain sent me one last email from a new address, 3 paragraphs of bluster ending with cease and desist. He attached nothing official, just his own signature typed out under a Gmail account with his nickname in it. I forwarded it to the lawyer and blocked him. The chef tried calling from a withheld number twice that night. I didn't pick up. I ended that week back at the station in Fuengirola with the same officer, handing over the new harassment emails for my file. I also saw a doctor and asked for a simple certificate noting the panic attack and insomnia. The lawyer said it was good to include. The officer was kind and told me, in that gentle way Spanish police have when something is clearly unacceptable, that I did well to come in. The yacht stayed in Malaga for 2 days and then left for the Canaries with a relief captain, a temp cook, and 2 day workers. The owner sent me a short message from the tarmac. They're gone. Thank you for telling me. I sat on a bench outside the lawyer's office and cried so hard I had to tuck my head into my elbows. Not from fear this time, from the drop after weeks of bracing. I don't know what will happen with the flag investigation or the Guardia Civil case. I do know that the South African girl has already spoken with the owner, and she sent me a voice note after that call. She sounded lighter. I felt lighter too. I'm staying in Malaga a few more days, sleeping, eating properly, listening to the ferry horns. I'll go back to work soon. I still love the sea. I just needed to see someone in authority say, out loud and in public, that what happened was not okay, and then actually do something about it. Update 4. Tuesday morning, 9:15, my phone lit up with the Cayman number I'd been waiting for. A surveyor from the registry patched me into a Teams call with a second person who introduced herself as legal, calm voice, clipped questions. They had already scanned the bridge logs and hours of rest sheets the owner handed over in Malaga. The surveyor asked me to walk him through my watches from Corsica down, exact hours, who relieved me, who was on the flybridge when, whether muster lists matched the 3 of us on board. I could hear him turning pages and, at one point, he just said, there's a lot of correction fluid on this week. He asked if I had ever signed a rest sheet. I hadn't. He asked if the AIS was off by instruction or by fault. I said it was a choice, his. They wanted to know about food inventories, how many life jackets I'd counted during the weekly drill, whether the sat phone had been locked away. I answered everything. They asked for permission to share my recordings with the issuing administration of the captain's endorsement. I gave it. The legal officer said they would be issuing an interim notice while they investigated. She didn't say what that meant. I didn't ask. When the call ended, she sent an email with an acknowledgement and a line that made me exhale for the first time that day. We appreciate your cooperation and will be in touch shortly regarding protective measures. An hour later, an email arrived from an address that ended in Gibraltar. Gov. GI. Borders and Coast Guard. They had gone back through their pre-arrival notifications for that week and there it was, a crew list submitted listing me as signing off in Gibraltar, passport number and nationality correct. They attached a 1-page letter, stamped, confirming that as a Colombian national without a visa I would not have been allowed to disembark and that any attempt to land me would have resulted in refusal of entry. For your records. I sent it straight to the lawyer and to Cayman. The lawyer replied 2 minutes later, this is gold. That afternoon, the owner forwarded me an oficio from Capitania Maritima de Malaga. An expediente sancionador had been opened for navigating in Spanish waters with AIS intentionally inoperative and for irregularities in the arrival notification. There was a proposed fine. The owner wrote that he would pay it to keep the boat clean and then pursue recovery from the former captain under his employment agreement. He also said Capitania had scheduled a technical inspection the next morning and asked if I wanted to be present or would rather not step onto that deck again. I didn't think I could, not yet. He understood. He sent a photo, though, just the helm, paper charts laid out, coffee cup, everything quietly in its place, and a short message, "We'll make it right." The Guardia Civil called me back the same evening. The officer who took my first statement let me know that the fiscal had agreed to open diligencias previas and that both the captain and the chef would be cited to give their own statements should they return to Spain. He asked if I had received any more messages. I forwarded a fresh hidden number call log and another email the chef had sent at 2 a.m., this time from a third Gmail with her nickname and the yacht's name in it. The lawyer filed for medidas cautelares to stop the harassment. By morning, the posts she'd put up tagging my name were gone. Then something I did not expect, a message from a man I didn't know, an engineer who had done day work on the boat last year. He had my number via the same deckhand who'd found the boat in Malaga. He told me he'd left after 2 weeks because the captain had taped over a high water alarm in the lazarette, too noisy at night. He had photos, a little square of blue painter's tape and silence. He also sent a screenshot of a WhatsApp where the captain wrote, "We don't need to log every little thing after a bilge pump failure." He had already sent it to Cayman that morning. He ended his voice note soft and tired. "I wish I'd made noise then." Capitania's inspection went ahead without me. The relief captain called after, polite, sparse. He'd handed over the logs, the hour sheets, the ISM checklist the previous captain had signed on the 28th with a flourish. He didn't say much else, but he did say that when they flipped the pages to that week, the ink tone changed midline. He laughed once, without humor, and added, "Let's say they were interested." The owner texted a photo later of a new satellite handset, yellow and indestructible looking, with a printed laminated card taped next to it, owner's line. He told me he'd had a proper food delivery come aboard, double-checked the expiry dates, and that the temp cook had left a list of what she'd thrown away. For reasons I can't explain, it was that detail that made my hands shake. Cayman wrote back on Thursday with a formal notice of investigation and a line stating that the former captain's Cayman endorsement was suspended pending outcome. They copied the issuing administration of his COC and requested dates of any vessels he had commanded under their flag in the last 5 years. The legal officer asked me to confirm, once more, that the gesture on the flybridge that night was a raised fist aimed at my face. I wrote yes and hit send. The South African girl sent in her statement and copies of her photos. The owner told me he had also filed as accusación particular so he could be informed at every step. The management agency called me, finally, someone senior. He said they were reviewing their incident reporting and would be instituting a direct whistleblower email outside of the captain's chain. He didn't ask me for a reference. He just said, "We failed you." I believed him as much as I could. And then there was a second girl, not the South African, another one from a summer 2 years back, French, just a first name and the same pattern. 3 weeks, a fight about rest hours, a hand on her upper arm. She found me through the lawyer. She didn't have recordings, she had an email she'd sent herself with a timestamp after it happened because someone once told her to document in real time. She forwarded it with a little apology for her English. It didn't need perfect English. It landed like a stone in a still pond. I am sleeping better. I had my first therapy session on Friday morning. We didn't talk about the sea, not really. We talked about the sound of the skipper's boots on the companionway and how my stomach drops when a door shuts loudly. The doctor wrote down a small sentence for me to keep in my bag, "No estás en ese barco." I read it on the bus and it helps more than it should. Before the week ended, I did something I thought I wouldn't be able to do so soon. I walked to the harbor and watched the boats move. Not my boat. Ferries, fishing boats, a white ketch with laundry flapping like flags. The relief captain texted to say they'd cleared out for the Canaries at first light, AIS on, crew list correct, coffee machine descaled. He added, "Weather looks fair." I said, "Buen viaje." He sent a little anchor emoji, and that was that. I don't know what the court will do or how long Cayman takes to draw a line under this. I do know that the owner has paid for 6 therapy sessions up front and sent me a note yesterday that said, "If you want to come back for a handover someday, you'll find a different ship." I don't know my answer yet. For now I am walking the Malaga promenade in the evenings, counting the buoys, answering every official email that lands, and, when my phone is quiet, letting the quiet be quiet. Update 5, Wednesday, 8:42, my inbox pinged with an email that had a crown at the top and a sender line that made my hands go cold, UK Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. They'd received the materials from Cayman and asked for a brief phone interview for the purpose of evaluating the continued fitness of the former captain to hold his cock. The officer on the line was precise, unemotional. He asked about the raised fist, the 2 grabs at my phone, and whether the AIS had been switched off while underway at night or during daylight. I told him what I knew and what I'd recorded. He thanked me and said, very simply, "Your account is consistent with the documentation received." He didn't say more, he didn't need to. By noon, the lawyer rang. The Juzgado had granted medidas cautelares, no contact, no messages, no tagging, for both of them. It was served by Burofax to the Palma address on their contracts. I got a scan of the stamped order with the judge's signature and the warning in the margin about penalties for breach. An hour later, The chef broke and sent a one-line email that was nothing like the torrent from before. "I am sorry for the messages." I didn't answer. I forwarded it to the file. The boat hit Las Palmas on Thursday and the relief captain told me Port State Control had come aboard early. 3 inspectors and a clipboard that didn't leave their hands for 2 hours. They checked MLC postings, the complaints procedure, the hours of rest sheets, the crew list against the people standing in front of them. He said they asked about the sat phone and smiled when they saw the laminated card with the owner's number taped beside it. They flagged the rest hour entries for corrections inconsistent with best practice, but marked them as historical and issued a recommendation for a new system. They left with a copy of the complaint contact poster the owner had printed overnight and a note that the AIS had been operating normally on approach and departure. The relief captain called it firm, fair. He sent me a photo of the galley fridge stocked with actual vegetables, and it was ridiculous how much that mattered to see. On Friday morning, the owner's lawyer called with a voice like a scalpel. The onboard phone I'd watched them hand to the lawyer in Malaga had been sent for forensic extraction. The tech report came back with the kind of details that make your chest hollow out. Archived WhatsApp messages recovered after delete, including one from the captain to the chef the week before this all happened. Turn AIS off after the headland. We don't need to give them our exact position. Another to a day worker from last season. Rest sheets are a suggestion, keep it tidy. There was also a note in the phone's calendar that read Gib drop off, sign off list. The lawyer said, "We will be attaching these to the Cayman file and to the expediente in Capitania." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. That same afternoon, Capitania Marítima de Málaga sent the owner a new oficio. The proposed fine for AIS had been formalized, and they were scheduling a follow-up visit to verify corrective actions under MLC. The owner paid the sanction immediately and wrote, in that clipped way he has when he's decided something, that he was terminating his contract with the old management agency and moving the yacht to a firm in Palma that had ex-captains on staff for compliance. He asked if I would be willing, paid, to spend a day with their team on a call to help write the onboard complaints procedure from a crew perspective. I said yes. It felt strange to see my name on a draft next to procedure, crew welfare and escalation, but it also felt like oxygen. At 1930, something else I didn't expect. A charter broker I'd met once in Antibes wrote a single sentence. He put in for a new boat. We asked for references. We won't be moving forward. Attached were 2 case numbers, mine and the South African girls, sent from the owner with permission. No drama, no explanation beyond that. The world is small and sometimes, blessedly, professional. Saturday I walked down to the marina with the lawyer to retrieve the last of my things from the boat, just a duffel I hadn't been able to face before. The relief captain met me at the passerelle. The cockpit felt like the same place and also not. The high water alarm in the lazarette was uncovered, the little square of blue tape folded like a dead moth and stuck to the chart table with a note that said do not cover. The ISM checklist was reprinted clean and blank, ready to be filled by someone else's hand. The notebook with the lock sat under the nav seat. I took my bag. I didn't linger. On the way off, the relief captain pointed to the man overboard sling hung properly by the transom and said, not to show anything off, just, quietly, we've checked everything. Sunday morning, the Guardia Civil officer from Fuengirola called to tell me the chef had actually presented herself at a station in Palma after the burofax and given a short statement with her lawyer, which will be added to the file. He asked if I was still receiving messages. I wasn't. He sounded relieved on my behalf in that very Spanish way that's half official and half human. Monday, almost comic in its timing, a cream envelope with red stripes arrived at the lawyer's office addressed to me, a burofax from the captain, requirimiento de rectification. 3 paragraphs insisting I withdraw my accusations and a line about damages. The lawyer dictated a reply on the spot, citing the case numbers, the protective order, and the existence of the recordings, and requested a postal address for service for future notifications. He sent it and smiled with his eyes more than his mouth. In the afternoon, the MCA wrote again. They were issuing an interim suspension of his cock pending the outcome of their investigation and asked for consent to share my materials with 2 other administrations where he had sailed under temporary endorsements. I sent the consent. 10 minutes later, Cayman copied me on a notice to the owner that the endorsement remained suspended and that any attempt by the former captain to serve aboard a Cayman vessel would be reported to the issuing administrations. The email ended with a phrase that made my hands go warm for the first time in a while: crew safety remains paramount. The South African girl sent me a picture of her finally getting her withheld salary back. The owner had wired it to her with an apology I recognized as his. The French girl wrote to say she'd been put in touch with the MCA too. The engineer from last year forwarded a confirmation that his photos were lodged with Cayman and thanked me for making noise. I did the call with the new management on Tuesday, 2 hours of talking through what safe looks like from a bunk room and a night watch, the tiny things that signal when something isn't right, who should hold the code to the sat phone, where to post the complaint addresses so they don't get quietly peeled off. They took notes. They asked good questions. At the end, the senior manager said, "We'll put your name on the policy if you want." I told him I didn't need that and he laughed, not unkindly, and said, "Then we'll just do it right." Therapy on Wednesday. We didn't talk about hearings or flags. We talked about the exact sound the high water alarm should make, and how to trust that if it goes off, someone will come. The boat left Las Palmas the next day for Mindelo, AIS, a clean green line across my phone. The relief captain sent one message: all good on board. I looked at the sea on the little screen and let my shoulders drop. At dusk, down on the promenade, a ferry blew its horn and the city answered with lights. I stood there a long time. I am not on that boat. And somehow, some small part of me is still allowed to love the sound of water slapping a hull.